Left my boyfriend over his foot fetish, influenced by friends to call him a creep, and now I'm scared of losing him forever. I was with my boyfriend for a year and our relationship was fucking amazing. He constantly made me feel loved and always treated me with respect. He was always doing little things for me and would help me with stuff even when I didn't ask for it. The sex was amazing too, it just felt like we were compatible on every level. About 3 months ago, he told me he had something to confess. He said that he had a foot fetish and that he hadn't told me about it because an ex of his had taken it weird and he didn't want me to think badly of him. Looking back, it was kind of obvious since he would always compliment my nail polish and was pretty eager to rub my feet if I asked him to. He even paid for me to get a pedicure because he said French tips would look cute on me. Nothing really changed much after that point. He wasn't pushy or anything, but he would suck on my toes during sex, which admittedly felt pretty good. I was hanging out with 3 of my friends a few weeks ago and I mentioned that he liked my feet. 2 of them started telling me that was a red flag and that he might be a creep. I had seen some people who were weird about it online before, but they were showing me all these websites and forums and people who take creep shots of women's feet, and I started feeling anxious. My third friend who was there was neutral about it but told me maybe to talk to him because he had never really given off those kinds of vibes. I stupidly didn't and pushed it to the back of my head until I saw him again 2 days later. We were at my apartment and were messing around. He started to kiss my feet and I pulled back from him. He asked me what was wrong and I spent like 10 minutes just repeating what my friends had told me and about how people who like feet are weird and don't care about anything else. He looked really sad and told me he didn't know I felt like that about him. He got up and left. I don't fucking know why I said any of that stupid shit to him. He had never been creepy, he had never been anything but loving to me, but I called him a pervert. And then I immediately turned to my friends and they were telling me that he was confirmed one of those creepy feet guys because he left instead of talking to me and apologizing. My neutral friend again told me to talk to him, but I spent 2 days thinking to myself that there must be something wrong with him. He didn't contact me again, so I texted him we need to talk about our relationship. He texted back he would come over that night, and he did. He was holding a box of my stuff I had left at his place and said I'm not going to stay with someone who thinks I'm a predator. Then he just walked away. I was stunned and didn't say anything, but that quickly turned to anger. I just thought they were right, he's a fucking creep, I'm glad he's gone. I turned to my friends again and the 2 told me they'd help me get over him and hook me up with someone normal. My neutral friend advised me again to not leave my relationship like this, but I'm an idiot. I'm horrible. I'm a piece of fucking shit and I deserve fucking everything I get. Every night the past month I've been thinking about him, and the more I think the bigger that pit in my stomach gets. It all exploded a week ago. I got extremely drunk and had that horrible realization hit me all at once. I lost the man I loved over nothing. Nothing. It was my fucking fault and I would never be with him again. I was sobbing hysterically and called both of my 2 friends who had egged me on. I told them that I never wanted to see them again and some other things I won't repeat here. I blocked them on everything. My other friend tried calling me but I couldn't bear to talk to her. It was about 1 a.m. when I called him. He hadn't blocked me so it went through. I begged him to take me back. I told him about what my friends had told me. I told him he wasn't a pervert and that I should never have told him that. I told him I loved him more than anything and that I trusted him, that he could do whatever he wanted with any part of my body and that I would never think he was some kind of creep because I know he isn't like that. He cut me off eventually. He told me that if I was drinking to please stop and go to sleep. He sounded so sad and it just shattered my fucking heart again. He tried calling me earlier tonight but I didn't pick up. I'm so fucking scared that he's going to tell me to just fuck off and leave him alone. I know I would deserve it. I know I deserve worse. But I can't do it. I love him so fucking much. I need him. I just want him to hold me again and touch me wherever he wants and tell me that he forgives me. I feel like throwing up whenever I think that he might never be with me again. I wish I wasn't such a stupid bitch. Update 1. Before I start, I don't intend anything in this update to be taken as a self-absolution of guilt or blame. I accept that I'm the one that screwed up and the blame rests solely on me. I'm not trying to diminish that or what I did. So there's a park about halfway between both of our places. We decided to meet there. I arrived a few minutes before he did and was very nervous. When I saw him walking up I felt the urge to cry but I drove it down. I didn't want to do anything that would make him think I'm trying to manipulate him. It was worse when he hugged me, but I managed to compose myself. He asked how I was doing and I told him the truth, that I was messed up. I asked him the same and he told me he was okay but he had that same sad look on his face from the last time I saw him. I asked him if I could tell him something before we talked about anything else and pulled out the apology I had written in my notes. I told him I was sorry for everything. I was sorry for making him feel unsafe with me. I was sorry for ever insinuating that he was a pervert. I was sorry for betraying his trust and telling others about our sex life. I was sorry for not communicating with him. I was sorry for not standing up for him. I was sorry for not standing up for myself and letting my opinion of him be colored by anything other than the 2 of us. I was sorry for leaving him in the dark for a month and not talking to him sooner. I was sorry for my drunken rant, for trying to emotionally manipulate him into coming back to me, and especially for making him feel like I still thought he was a pervert. I was sorry for hurting him the same way his ex had. At one point I noticed he was tearing up and I just couldn't hold it anymore. I cried while I finished reading it to him. I told him that I was truly happy with him and I hope he isn't put off from exploring his fetish in the future. whoever that might be with. He thanked me and we cried together for a little while. He started talking and told me the reason he called was that 2 of my friends had contacted him and explained that they were worried about me and told him some of what had happened. It was the neutral friend along with one of the 2 friends who had fed me the stuff about foot fetishes. I didn't get a lot of the specifics and I didn't ask anything else because there was more important stuff he wanted to talk about, but I guess I could get what happened straight from one of them. I was a little deflated after he told me this and worried he might think I was trying to manipulate him through my friends, but he quickly moved on. He told me the whole story about his ex. They had been together for longer than we had, about 2 years, before he told her about his fetish. The difference was that she was immediately disgusted by it. She told him she was leaving no matter how much he begged and promised he would never bring it up again. But then he told me what I did felt much worse because it seemed like I had accepted him only to stab him in the back. I wanted to get on my knees and beg him to forgive me, but I let him finish. In the end, we were both quiet for a while before he asked if we were done. I know I should have been strong and told him that I would go with whatever he decided, but I'm weak. I asked him if there was any chance we could still be together. He told me that he still had feelings for me but that he couldn't handle me hurting him again. I mentioned the stuff with my friends and that I was looking to start therapy. He told me he was happy that I was doing that, but it wasn't changing his mind. He said there might be a chance in the future, after I've worked on myself, but right now he was too hurt. I get the feeling that he was just saying that so I wouldn't be hurt. We hugged again and said goodbye and I had to fight every urge in my body to not run after him. I know I screwed up at the end, but I'm taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm going to call my friend, the neutral one, and ask if she can forgive me for not talking to her too, and maybe if she can come over and hide my phone from me so I don't get the urge to bother him. I don't know about my 2 other friends. I don't know about anything right now. I spent like 5 of the last 6 hours crying and I feel just about out of tears. I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep. I think I'm going to just try and sleep and then continue looking for therapists in the morning. I don't know if I'll update anymore, so sorry if anyone was expecting more. So this is going to be the last thing I'll post. I slept for a while and when I woke up my friend got in contact with me and came over. She wasn't the least bit mad at me and was just concerned that I hadn't talked to her. I apologized profusely to her. I really don't deserve her kindness, but it honestly felt good after everything today. To the people who messaged me with concern, thank you and I think I'll be fine. I'm still going to go to therapy to work on my problems and make sure I never do something like this to someone I love ever again. Update 2. I said I probably wouldn't write again and then life decided to kick the legs out from under me. I had my first therapy appointment. I thought it was going to be all calm and quiet and tissue boxes and instead I started sweating the second I sat down and word vomited for 40 minutes straight. My therapist didn't flinch. She just kept asking me these stupid soft questions that made me feel like my chest was going to explode. I walked out dizzy and sort of numb and then on the sidewalk I started laughing like a crazy person because it felt like somebody finally took a brick off my neck. I went home and stared at the ceiling for an hour and then my neutral friend texted me and asked if she could come by because she had something. She showed up with a manila envelope like this was a spy movie. I thought maybe it was receipts for the time I spent crying on her couch and then she pulled out printouts and I recognized his handle in the first screenshot and my stomach left my body. It was a burner account DMing him the week before all this blew up. The profile picture was a perfect pedicure and a fake name, and it wasn't hers. It was one of the 2 I cut off. The messages started out lol I heard you're into feet, and then when he said I'm in a relationship. Please don't message me this, they doubled down and sent one of my pictures. It wasn't sexual, it was that candid from my couch where my feet happened to be in frame, the one I put on my story. They said, bet your girl wouldn't mind and he replied, she would, and so do I, please stop. The timestamps were days before I freaked out on him. There were more. They told him they were going to expose him if he didn't admit it and he said, I'm not ashamed of my preferences but this is inappropriate. Don't contact me again. Then they made a throwaway post on a local page about watch out for this guy who preys on women's feet at the gym. I read that sentence 10 times because it didn't even sound like English. He doesn't even go to that gym. And there was his face, lifted from my photos. Blurred, barely. Neutral friend said she hadn't known until a few days ago. The other one confessed in some messy chain of calls when she realized I'd blocked her and people were asking questions. She cried and said they were protecting me. I put the papers down and stood at my sink and just kept rinsing a clean glass. I wanted to throw up and murder someone at the exact same time. I wanted to go scream at both of them. I wanted to teleport to his front door and lay down on his doormat and not move. I texted him and told him I'd found out something awful and that I had proof and I wasn't sending it to manipulate him, just to be honest and take responsibility for letting these people near his life. I told him I would send it and then not bother him, and he could do whatever he wanted with it. He called instead. His voice was so careful at first that I started crying before I said hello. I hate that I keep crying at him, it feels like betrayal even in my own ears. I read him a couple of messages. He was quiet and then he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a month. He said, I knew something happened. I didn't know how far it went. He told me that after he left my apartment that night he started getting random DMs with feet pics and gross comments and a couple of messages tagging his job's public page. He didn't want to tell me because he didn't want it to sound like he was trying to scare me back into his corner, or make me pick a side between my friends and him. He'd reported them all, changed a couple of usernames, blocked, and then stopped going to his usual coffee shop because he saw someone taking a photo of his shoes on the sidewalk and he didn't know if it was a coincidence. He said it quietly, like he was embarrassed to even admit he felt unsafe. I asked if he would meet me and he said not alone. I said okay. We met at the same park, but he brought his roommate and I brought my friend. We sat at separate benches like we were doing some sort of prisoner exchange and then eventually ended up at one bench because it felt stupid to yell across. He held the papers like they were hot. He didn't look at me much, and I forced myself not to scan his face for softness because I didn't want to go fishing for forgiveness in expressions. His roommate was kind and weirdly funny in that way people are when they can tell you're vibrating with shame and want to make sure you don't explode. We decided to go make a report. Not because we thought anything dramatic would happen, but because he said he wanted something official on paper. He didn't want to wait for the next thing. I had never sat in a police station for anything other than a parking ticket. I hated every second of it. It smelled like old coffee and cold floor cleaner. The officer took it seriously enough to make my heart slow down a little. He asked questions I didn't have to answer, but I did because I was done hiding and I wanted it all out there. We both gave our statements. I watched him ask the officer to put me down as third-party source and not write in any graphic detail about his kink because it wasn't relevant. He put his body between me and a stupid bulletin board like that would keep me from spiraling, and I loved him so much right then I could taste metal in my mouth. I signed my name and it looked like a child's. When we walked back out into the sun he kept saying, "Thank you" in this small voice like he was afraid saying it too loud would make it disappear. I told him I was sorry again, and he said please, we can't keep circling the same drain, or we'll both drown. We got coffee at a hole-in-the-wall place, because the regular spot is off limits for him right now, and we sat on a curb because all the tables were taken by teenagers doing math homework. We didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about feet. We talked about the stupid squirrel that kept approaching us like it was Oda Latte and about how his roommate is training for a 10K and about the plant we wrecked last winter because we forgot it near the radiator. He told me he started putting his phone in another room at night so he could actually sleep. He said he read a book. He said he looked at therapy websites and then closed them and then opened them again and then closed them again and he thinks. He's not sure. I told him about my therapist and how I realized I've spent my whole life looking at other people's faces to find out what I should think and that it's scary to not do that now, but I'm going to try. He nodded. He told me he believes me. He still wasn't coming back to me. He said that plainly, gently, looking at his cup. He said he wanted to try being in each other's lives without hurting each other. I said I could do that. He told me what he needed for now. No late night calls. No touching. No slipping into flirt because it's easy and then both of us waking up gutted. If I feel like I want to say 10 things, I should write them down and tell him too. It sounds so clinical when I write it out, but when he said it my entire body relaxed because finally there were rules I could follow that weren't just the manic rules in my head about act normal, don't cry, don't be crazy, don't beg, be chill. I can do tangible. The next week was the most boring and steady my life has felt in months. I went to therapy again. I did my homework like a dork. I told my friend she can keep my phone every Friday night because that's when the urge hits like a bus. I wrote down things I wanted to say and half of them looked childish in the morning and I threw them away and it felt good. I bought a little notebook to put in my bag like I'm a poet with no poems, and when I wanted to text him 17 times I wrote I want to text you 17 times and then waited, and then sent him one message that said, I saw a squirrel steal a donut. He wrote back, it was probably that same one. The dumbest, sweetest little relief flooded me. The friend I cut off showed up at my building 2 days after we filed the report. She buzzed my intercom and started crying immediately. I went downstairs because the last time I walked away from a mess it set fire to my life. She tried to hug me and I kept my arms at my sides. She called me ungrateful. She called me dramatic. She said they were protecting me from becoming fat material and then laughed like it was a joke we were both in on. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror of my own worst self. I told her to leave. She got angry and said she'd do it all again. I said I was going to include that in the report. She stopped playing the victim then and called me a bitch and stormed off. I shook on my stoop for 10 minutes and then went upstairs and texted him exactly what happened and told him I'd rather he heard it from me. He thanked me and asked me if I was okay. I said I was shaky and proud, and he said, good. He asked if I wanted to go to the farmer's market with him and his roommate that weekend. Public, bright, people everywhere. Safe. I said yes. I wore the most boring shoes I own. We bought peaches and some fancy bread and he made a joke about how I always pick the ugliest tomato just to give it a chance. He didn't hug me hello, and I didn't try to hold his hand, and that restraint felt like we were both holding something precious together even without touching it. He paid with exact change like he always does because he's secretly 75 years old. He asked if I still had the scarf we found in that antique store. He remembered the exact day. It felt like someone untied a knot behind my ribs. In the middle of all this, my therapist asked me to do something that made me want to crawl out of my skin. She told me to write a letter to myself the day I told him those things in my apartment. Not a letter to him. To me. It took me 3 tries and a lot of pacing, but I wrote it. I told that version of me to put the phone down and to go stand in a corner and look out the window and say the sentence, I love him and he loves me and we can handle this together, out loud. It hurt more than the apology to him because I couldn't hide behind being sorry. I had to be kind to myself without excusing what I did. I didn't show it to him. I didn't show it to anyone. It felt like the tiniest brick laid in something I might be able to stand on eventually without wobbling. He texted me a picture of a plant a few days after the market. It was a cutting from the dead one we killed. He'd kept a piece and rooted it in water like some miniature act of hope, and now it had leaves. I wasn't prepared for that level of metaphor in my kitchen. I stared at the tiny green thing and felt this soft, stupid wave of possibility that didn't knock me down with it. I didn't immediately spin it into we're back together in my head. I just thought about how nice it is when something grows even after you've been careless with it. He asked if I wanted the cutting. I told him I wasn't ready to be responsible for anything leafy, and he laughed. It didn't sound sad when he laughed. I cried afterwards, quietly, into the sink. Yesterday there was another small, big thing. He texted me in the afternoon that he was going to a nail place with his sister because she'd roped him into a self-care day before her trip, and he asked if I had any recommendations because I know all the spots. It knocked the wind out of me, and then I realized he wasn't trying to poke at anything. He was being a brother. He was letting me exist near something that used to be ours without turning it into a weapon. I gave him the name of a place where they don't mind walk-ins. He sent me a picture of his sister's hands and her nails were adorable, and then he sent a picture of his own toes from ankle down, and my brain short-circuited for a second and then came back on. I didn't feel that desperate, guilty hunger I've been carrying around since this all started. I felt normal. I told him his choice of color made him look like a summer camp counselor, and he said he'd take that as a compliment. It was stupid and funny, and for 5 minutes it was easy again. I don't know where any of this ends. He still hasn't said he wants to get back together. I still haven't asked. I keep wanting to, and then I picture the look on his face at the park the first time, that crater of hurt, and I shut my mouth because right now my job is to not make it about my immediate comfort. I'm not trying to be the hero of my own redemption arc. I'm feeding my small routines and letting myself be boring. I get out of bed. I make coffee. I journal like someone gave me detention. I show up to the once-a-week text like it's my shift and I'm getting paid in the possibility of peace. When I spiral, I go sit on my floor and put my hands on my shins and breathe until my shoulders drop. I'm not messing with my phone at 1 a.m. I haven't drunk dialed anyone. The parts of me that love to sprint to extremes are hating it, and that feels like proof I'm doing something right. He came over tonight to grab a book he left months ago. He texted first. I put on a hoodie and brushed my teeth 3 times and almost put perfume on and then didn't because we are adults and not in a movie. He stood in my doorway, and the air did that weird humming thing it does when 2 magnets are in the same space. He didn't come inside. We stood there, and I handed him the book, and he said, "Thank you," and then he looked down at my feet and then back up at my face. It was 1 heartbeat. It wasn't loaded with anything, it was just a glance because people look at people. He told me he was proud of me, and I said I'm trying, and he nodded. He said he had a thought, and told me to feel absolutely no pressure, and asked if in a couple of weeks I might want to go with him to a show his friend's band is playing. A public space. Seats. Loud enough to not talk too much. A thing that is an event and not a test. I said I'd like that. He smiled with half his mouth the way he always does when he's trying to look cooler than he feels. He left. I closed my door and slid down it like a cliche and then lay on the floor and stared at the ceiling until a lamplight moth bounced off my face and I laughed like an idiot. This is not a fairy tale where I learn a lesson and get the boy delivered to my lap on a cloud. I don't even know if we end up together. I know that the things that broke this weren't mysterious at all. They were me being a coward and other people being cruel and him being a human who got hurt. I know that right now I'm exactly where I need to be, which is inside the mess, doing the boring work, and not burning anything else down. If anything else happens, I'll decide then how to respond like a person who loves him and also loves me. For the first time in months, both feel possible. Update 3. I didn't expect the thing that tipped the week sideways to be about socks, but of course it was. Someone at work made a joke in the break room about open-toed season being a menace to productivity, and half the room did that lazy laugh people do when they're not actually amused, and I felt this cold curtain drop over me. I could hear myself breathing, and I could hear the refrigerator doing its little death rattle, and I could also feel my brain asking me if I wanted to say nothing and then go home and chew through my own tongue later. I leaned on the counter, picked a coffee stirrer out of the holder, snapped it in half, and said, "Can we not kink shame at work? Or at all? It's not funny." I said it like I was tossing a pebble into a lake, not like I was ripping a fire alarm, but everyone froze anyway. One guy made a face and half smiled like he wanted me to bail him out with "I'm kidding," and I just looked at him and waited for my skin to catch back up to my bones. He said okay, and someone else changed the subject to the coffee being weak like it was a hostage exchange. My hands shook for the next 10 minutes, and then my manager DM'd me later and said, "Thanks for saying something," and told me if anyone ever gave me grief to send them to her. And I stared at that message for a long time because apparently you can be an adult and do the right thing with your throat on fire and nothing explodes. The show was Friday. I almost canceled twice and then I didn't because we made rules and I'm doing the thing where I actually try living inside them. I wore jeans that don't do anything special for me and sneakers with laces so tight a hurricane couldn't take them off my body. The venue was one of those old converted something or others where the floor is sticky but somehow in a historical way, and there are Christmas lights year round like that makes the health code look quaint. I got there early because I didn't want to be chronically late me and do the frantic apology thing as an opener. He walked up with his roommate and they both looked like they'd stepped out of a thrift store ad. His roommate in a denim jacket with an inexplicable pin that said "I break for possums," and him in the same stupid flannel from last fall that I used to steal because it smells like cedar and detergent in him. He didn't hug me. I didn't reach. He bought me a soda and himself one of those beers that tastes like citrus rind and resentment, and we found a spot by the side wall under a fan that squeaked every third rotation. The band started and it was loud enough to wash out the part of my brain that writes novels about disaster. I watched him laugh at a guy near the stage who was doing interpretive dancing with his whole sternum. He leaned in to say something and stopped himself and then pointed to our ears like after, and I nodded. The first new thing happened halfway through the set. A guy stumbled into me and sloshed his drink and the cold hit my ankle like a slap. It wasn't beer. It was one of those syrupy red things and it looked like I'd murdered a small fruit with my foot. I went to flinch and I saw his eyes flick down and then up in this immediate, automatic way, and for one wild second I could feel two versions of myself arguing. The old one who would turn it into a whole scene in my head, and the one I'm trying to be who said out loud, calmly, "Bathroom?" He nodded and we wove through the crowd like we were learning a slow dance. He stood outside the door, not blocking, just stupidly present like a human coat rack with feelings. I scrubbed at my shoe with coarse paper towels and watched a girl in the mirror behind me do her eyeliner with a steadiness I will never possess. When I came out he only said, "Okay?" And I said, "I'm fine," and it wasn't a lie. After the show we spilled out into air that tasted like metal and wet leaves. His friend's band was doing that sweaty victory hug thing near the curb and his roommate got pulled in and we were briefly just two people on a sidewalk next to a mural of a giant cat. He said, "Thanks for coming," and his mouth did that half smile he does when he's forcing himself to play it cool and failing. Then he did the second new thing. He told me he went to therapy. He said it like he was reporting a weather pattern, like, wind out of the west, 40% chance of tears. He told me the therapist asked him to define words he uses about himself and he realized they were words other people gave him when he was 13 and 14 and he'd never questioned them. He told me about the first time he got outed for liking what he likes, how some idiot kid in high school grabbed his phone and saw his search history and did the you thing and spread it, until girls he barely knew would hike their feet onto desks like they were daring him to combust. He said he'd managed to forget how that felt because you have to move on, and then all this brought it right back, and he was tired of carrying things like they were his alone to carry. He looked at a leaf shimmying in a puddle while he said it. I knew better than to reach out and I wanted to anyway until my fingers ached. I told him I was proud of him and he rolled his eyes and said he's not a Boy Scout, nobody gives badges for not being a stubborn idiot, and I said then I'm making one out of felt. We walked to the corner to wait for his ride home because his roommate had the car. A guy honked at a girl with a trombone case, because this city is made of nonsense, and for a second we both laughed at the exact same time and I realized I haven't wanted to crawl inside that sound and live there so much in months. He said, "Wanna grab a slice?" Like he was asking if we needed oxygen, and we went to the pizza place with the weirdly aggressive tip jar. We sat side by side at the counter because there were only 2 stools and there was a line forming behind us, and we ate in that hot cheese silence that makes you feel like a functioning mammal, and he told me his sister loved her nails and that she told him she'll fight me in a parking lot if I screw up again, and then immediately said she was kidding and then told him she wasn't. I asked if I could text her and he shrugged one shoulder like that's your choice, and that night I sent her a message. I told her I was sorry. I didn't defend myself. She sent back, "If you hurt him again I will take your kneecaps, but thank you for saying this. Also, do you have a good cuticle oil rec?" I think I screamed into my pillow and then recommended one and then lay on my back with my arms out like a chalk outline and smiled at my ceiling like a lunatic. 2 days later the officer called. My throat turned to dust for no reason at all. He was matter of fact in a way that made me feel like a person and not a clown exploding out of a small car. He said they'd contacted one of the women. She admitted to making the account and said she'd gotten carried away. The phrasing made bile crawl up the back of my throat so quick I had to sit on the floor with my forehead on my knee. He said they were issuing a harassment warning and that further activity would be grounds for charges. He asked if I'd be comfortable writing a separate statement about the in-person incident at my building. I said yes. I hung up and went very still and then I went very not still and I wrote the statement and then I went for a walk like I was trying to wear the pavement down to bedrock. I didn't text him right away. I waited until I wasn't vibrating, and then I told him what the officer said. He wrote back, "Good," and then, "How are you?" I said, "Mad okay," because that's what it was. He sent me a picture of that ridiculous plant. It's in a small ceramic pot now. He named it Kevin. I told him that was an insult to Kevins everywhere and he said then it can be devil's ivy named Kevin, which is objectively worse, and we both made fun of the plant until the urge to set something on fire passed. My therapist did the thing again where she makes me do something I don't want to and then holds the space around it without acting like I'm a brave soldier. She told me to practice disagreeing with innocuous things. She made me tell her my favorite season and then tell her 3 reasons it sucks. She made me say no out loud, to her face, even though she was asking if she could get up and grab a tissue for me. It was humiliating and also ridiculously helpful, and I hate that it was. I told him about it and he said he was doing homework too, and it sounded like it came out of a feelings worksheet meant for aliens trying to impersonate humans. He said, I had to write down 3 memories where I was kind to myself and the page was blank for 5 minutes, and I said, I'll spot you one. And I told him about the time he drove across town to bring me soup when I had the flu, and he said, no, that's me being kind to you. And I said, right, and then you fell asleep sitting upright in a chair because you didn't want to get whatever I had, and then you woke yourself up snoring and laughed at yourself instead of being embarrassed, and that was kind. He went quiet like he was hearing a new language, and I wanted to bottle that up and drink it on days when I'm a weasel. The second friend, the one who sent the screenshots originally, came clean to me, out of nowhere, like she'd been holding her breath and realized oxygen exists. She sent a long text that used a lot of words like context and concern and barely any like sorry. She said she'd gotten caught up, which I guess is what you call it when you harass someone and nearly blow up their life. I wrote and deleted 6 responses and then finally wrote, I won't be in contact with you. Please don't contact him again. The police have your name. She sent back, wow, and I put my phone face down and went and washed dishes that were already clean, because I needed to do something repetitive and wet. I didn't want to tell him, and also every cell in my body wanted to tell him, because lying by omission is still lying in my body's courtroom. I told him. He just said, thanks. He'd already heard from the officer. His sister asked me to get coffee. I almost didn't go because I was sure it was going to be a medieval trial by combat except with words, but she was kind in that way people are when they've already yelled at you in their head for weeks and got tired of the version where you're a cartoon villain. She brought a tote full of produce like she just raided a farm and ate an apple with the calm of a monk. She asked me what happened in my brain and I told her. She asked me what I was doing about it and I told her. She told me that my 2 former friends are from a special planet where the sun only shines on them. She told me she loved her brother, not the way a romantic partner does, but not a molecule less protective, and if I came back into his life I needed to know I wasn't walking into a warm bath, I was walking into a very small room with a lot of sharp edges and a person who has been cut. I said I know. My voice shook. She nodded like she'd been waiting for my voice to shake so she could see if I was going to pretend it wasn't. She paid for both our coffees even though I tried to, and as we were leaving she said, you made a thing that could have turned him into a joke again. You are making it so he's a person again. Keep doing that. I went home and sat on the floor and petted my rug like a dog because that's who I am now, apparently, someone who gives tactile credit to her furniture for existing. The last new thing scared me in a way that I didn't expect, and it wasn't even about us. I was walking home at dusk and someone behind me did that half jog to get ahead of me, and for a second my body said danger before my brain did. I turned and looked and it was a teenager carrying a skateboard the size of a coffin, and he said, sorry, in that harumphing way boys apologize when they're trying not to look like apologizing. I took a breath that felt like breathing soup. Then I unlocked my door and stood inside my own apartment with my back against it and understood, viscerally, what he meant when he said sometimes it just feels unsafe for no reason and then there is a reason and nobody else sees it as reason enough. I texted him, random teen with skateboard made me feel 90 and also like a haunted house, and he sent, skateboards are a menace, and I laughed out loud to nobody and then I made tea like I was 80 and my chest stopped trying to climb out of my throat. He came by again. This time it wasn't for a book. He'd bought a new frying pan because he finally gave up on the cursed one we both took turns pretending wasn't garbage. He'd ordered it to my place accidentally because that's what happens when you have each other's addresses saved and then your hands remember things your relationship isn't sure it does. He texted to ask if he could swing by and if I could bring it downstairs because he didn't want to blur this in to come in and then talk and then maybe cry, and then we're hunched over my sink pretending we're in a different year. I brought it down. It was in a box with too much tape and I watched him attempt to pick it up like that wouldn't be awkward, and then we both laughed at the exact same time because he is objectively terrible at lifting anything with grace. He said, "Want to help me get this open so I don't bleed out in this stairwell?" And so we sat on my stoop and I wrestled a knife out of my mailbox because I'm apparently the kind of neighbor who keeps tools in her mail, and we cut the stupid thing open. He held the pan up like it was Excalibur. The sky was the weird shade of blue that looks fake. He looked at me and said, "Do you want to go to the thing in the park next month? The outdoor movie? It's one of those setups where they project some old film and everyone sits on blankets and pretends mosquitoes are part of the ambience." He said, "We can sit far from people. We can leave if it feels bad. No pressure." I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay," and the way he said it made something in my shoulder blades unclench. He did the smallest possible touch and it felt like a bell ringing at the end of a school day in a town I used to live in. He didn't touch me, exactly. He handed me the empty box and our fingers did that thing where they misjudge and skim for a second and then withdraw, and we both pretended we didn't notice while also very much noticing. There was no jolt, no history montage. It was nothing and it was not nothing. He said, "Thanks," again, like he was cataloging gratitude and wanted to do it out loud. I said, "You're welcome," and didn't say anything else because I'm learning how to let the smallest thing be exactly big enough for one day. That night, I did not spin. I didn't start writing script versions of a future where we were suddenly fine or catastrophes where I bump into him 5 years from now and he's married to someone whose nails are always perfect and who never raised her voice in a kitchen. I brushed my teeth. I watered the plant I bought that is very much not named Kevin and is somehow still alive. I wrote down one thing that scared me and one thing I did anyway, and I went to bed before midnight like a human. And then this morning, because the universe is a comedian, I had to go get a new key cut, and the guy at the hardware store had a display of little key caps shaped like fruit. He said, "You look like a grape," which is a sentence I can't unhear now, and I said, "Give me the orange," and he handed me the grape anyway, and I did the thing my therapist would cackle over if I told her. I said, "No, the orange," and he swapped it without making a face, and I walked out into sun that felt like warm laundry, and I laughed out loud because you can be a person who does little dumb things differently and the sky does not split in two. Nothing huge has happened. No kiss, no music swelling. The worst people did not grow conscience vines overnight and become better. The best version of me didn't move in and evict the anxious goblin who lives in my sternum. But here is what did happen: we are standing near each other without making new wounds. I stood up in a room and said a thing that mattered to me even though my body hated it. Someone official wrote down a bad thing with our names next to the truth instead of a rumor. He sat in a chair and told a stranger about a boy who got mocked, and I stood on a sidewalk and held space for the man he is now without trying to lick the wound closed with apologies. We picked a movie. We bought a frying pan. I put an orange cover on a key. If the next thing that happens is awful, I'll handle it. If the next thing that happens is small and gorgeous, I'll try not to grab it so hard I crush it. Right now I'm going to take a picture of a squirrel on my fire escape and send it to him with no caption and go make a sandwich and eat it standing up like an animal because chairs are for people who aren't late for their lives, and I am trying very hard to be on time.